Thanks, Allison, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Empathy Lab. My name is Emily Lucio, and I'm the ADA 504 coordinator here at the University of Maryland. As the ADA 504 coordinator, it is my responsibility to guide the university's efforts to move beyond compliance and towards seamless access. As the university's focal point for disability-related initiatives, the ADA 504 Coordinator's Office collaborates with university offices, government agencies, and advocacy groups to inform decision-making and ensure university compliance with state and federal mandates. My office addresses accessibility issues and reports of disability-based discrimination on campus. Now I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves. I will turn it over to Kosi.
Hi, my name is I'm Kosi Asabere, and I just want to add a disclaimer. I do stutter, so you will hear that throughout this presentation. But I am a digital accessibility specialist here at UMD. I have over 10 years of experience providing guidance and expertise to the UMD community. So I'm happy to be here today. I also do want to point out one other thing. I am blind, so I will be using a screen reader with some magnification. So at times my video will be off. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Mita.
Thank you, Kosi. Hi, everyone. My name is Auromita Nagchaudhuri. I use she, her pronouns. I also go by Mita. I'm a quality assurance specialist in the Office of Marketing and Communications for the digital team. I predominantly work on testing websites, documents, and digital assets and establishing accessibility guidelines for the university. And now over to Allison.
My name is Allison Dickinson, she, her pronouns, and I do communications for UMD's Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And I'm also here to help out on the back end with some tech stuff. So next slide, please. I'm here to share a bit about accessibility for today's event. We've turned the chat off for accessibility reasons, but please do feel free to put any questions that you have into the Q&A feature. We'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. We'll also at that point allow folks to raise your hands in Zoom if you want to turn your microphone on to ask your question. If you're experiencing any tech issues today whatsoever, feel free to just put those into the Q&A as well, and I will keep an eye on it and do my best to help right away. If you'd like to view the slides and materials in any alternative formats today, we do have the PowerPoint slides, which we're sharing. Those are available at go.umd.edu/D1. That's D as in Delta or D as in digital accessibility, D and then the number 1. Or you can view a plain text version of today's presentation at go.umd.edu/D2. When I'm done talking, I'll pop those into the chat. I just can't do both at once. We will be recording today's event. We're going to caption that recording and then share it back out with everybody who has registered. I already got a question in the Q&A. Can we share with our friends and colleagues? Yeah, absolutely, please do. So we'll be sharing that out afterwards via email. My amazing colleagues will also be offering audio descriptions on any visually relevant content on the slides that we share today. Live cart captions are available. Thanks to our captioner, Pam, who's here with us. You can catch those via stream text at go.umd.edu/D3 or by pressing the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we also have amazing ASL interpreters here who we have pinned so you can see them. Again, I am here to help, so please message me in that Q&A if there's anything at all that's not working for you. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Emily.
Thanks, Allison. So in collaboration with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the Division of Information Technology, we have decided to put together for you for the first time as a university, a digital accessibility empathy lab. The purpose of this lab is to invoke a sense of empathy into the digital content we produce. We want this to be an opportunity for all of us to collectively work together in opening more doors for marginalized communities, which includes people with disabilities. This is an open, inclusive, and welcoming space for all. Maryland is a wonderful and diverse community. Diversity is one of our core values, and our campus is strengthened and enriched by people with disabilities. Accessibility is an approach to communication and engagement that recognizes the intersectional identities, experiences, and needs of our entire campus community. It goes beyond legal accommodations for students, staff, and faculty with disabilities. We work towards making this community where we each can bring our whole self to campus, where we each have the opportunity to thrive. And today's event is yet another example of an opportunity to expand our way of thinking about disability. So the goals for today are to learn about how an assistive technology user navigates the web, to learn about digital accessibility fundamentals, and to learn about some ways you can make a difference, and to foster and channel a culture of empathy in the digital experiences we produce. Next slide, please. So we want to start out by asking a question. What comes to mind when you think about being excluded? Maybe you thought about discrimination. Let me describe, first of all, the image on the right side of your slide for those who may not be able to see it. So there's a cartoon that shows a scene where 3 people are trying to watch a baseball game from behind a fence. There are 3 people. The tall person to the left is standing on a box. The person in the middle is not as tall and has to stand on their toes to see over the fence. The third person uses a wheelchair and is not able to get on the box or able to see over the fence. Okay, let's go to the second question. So what comes to mind when you think about being, so now what comes to your mind when you think about the word accessibility? Inclusive, open doors, I'm sure you've got other thoughts. And the image on this slide is the same cartoon. It shows a similar scene where 3 people are trying to watch a baseball game from behind a fence. There are 3 people. The tall person to the left is able to see over the fence without standing on a box. The person in the middle is now standing on 2 stacked boxes in order to see over the fence. And the third person who uses a wheelchair has a ramp with a platform at the top that makes them able to see over the fence. Next slide, please. What is digital accessibility? So next, we are going to talk about what we actually mean when we say digital accessibility. Accessible means a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, engage in the same interactions, and enjoys the same services as a person without a disability in an equally effective and equally integrated manner with substantially equivalent ease of use. Equivalent ease of use. And that's from the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. Digital accessibility is the practice and mindset of designing technology to be usable by as wide an audience as possible. As technology becomes increasingly ingrained in our daily lives, it is of paramount importance that we implement technologies that support the university's mission of promoting equality and diversity. To make sure we are all on the same page and up to speed, we are going to show you a short video clip called "What is Digital Accessibility?"
Imagine if 90% of the websites or mobile apps you use today locked you out. Everyone else continues to experience the convenience of mobile banking, the connectedness of social media, and the freedom of online shopping. But for you, they're inaccessible. For the 57 million people with disabilities in the United States, this is their everyday experience. People with visual, auditory, motor, speech, and cognitive disabilities rely on various assistive technologies and alternate methods of interaction to use digital documents, web, and mobile apps. People with visual disabilities may rely on screen readers, braille displays, zoom functions, or high-contrast colors to get value from what's displayed on screen. People with auditory disabilities often rely on captions or transcripts for video content. People with motor disabilities might require speech-to-text software or keyboard-only interactions. People with speech disabilities require a non-vocal means of interaction. And finally, People with cognitive disabilities often require thoughtful and organized layouts with clear direction. Digital accessibility is the practice of making digital documents, web, and mobile apps accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities. Accessible sites and apps are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Building accessible sites or apps can be tricky without the right guidance. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, published by the W3C, is the standard rule set that defines what makes a site accessible. Developers, testers, app owners, and accessibility experts from around the world rely on these standards for proper accessibility testing direction. In fact, many U.S. federal government agency sites and apps are required by law under Section 508 to be accessible. This law includes the WCAG standard. In the U.S. and European Union, WCAG is being adopted across private sector businesses as well. Whether you're following legal requirements or proactively working to make the web a better place, practicing digital accessibility makes a real difference for millions of people.
Thank you, Mina. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the question is accessibility required? Now that we are hopefully on the same page about digital accessibility, let's take a step back and talk a bit about why the accessibility is essential. To start with, it is the law. The ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. The purpose of the law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. The ADA gives civil rights protections to individuals with disabilities similar to those provided to individuals on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, age, and religion. It guarantees equal opportunity for individuals with disabilities in public accommodations, employment, transportation, state and local government services, and telecommunications. In addition, Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requires that federal agencies' electronic information technology is accessible to people with disabilities, including employees and members of the public. This is extended to the private sector through the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which you just heard about, WCAG, which are part of a series of web accessibility guidelines published by the Web Accessibility Initiative of the World Wide Web Consortium. We will also talk about the UMD Web Accessibility Policy. I will share a bit more about that later. While these are the laws, it is important to remember that accessibility is about people. While the regulations represent the letter of the law, it's how we implement these regulations that need to represent the spirit of the law. Accessibility is about people and how they are included in society. Next slide, please. Accommodations are when a person receives assistance in utilizing a service or accessing information. Accommodations are reactive. Someone hits an accessibility barrier, requests help, then receives help in response to that request. Accessibility means being proactive in ensuring equal availability and removing as many barriers as possible. This slide has a similar cartoon picture to the one we saw before. It shows three versions of the same scene where three people are trying to watch a baseball game from behind a fence. The left frame reads equality, and each person is standing on a box. The tall person and medium height person are able to see over the fence, and the short person is not. The middle frame reads equity. The tall person is standing on the ground. The medium height person is standing on one box, and the short person is standing on two boxes. All of them can see over the fence. The right panel reads liberation, and there is no fence at all. In this cartoon, the left panel represents inaccessible content. The central panel represents accommodations, and the right panel represents accessible content. The right panel is the ideal outcome. It is not sufficient to merely offer to help people on a case-by-case basis when they're unable to access our digital information or services. There are multiple reasons why. Access to information or services may be time sensitive and the user can't wait. The user may be afraid of the stigma of seeking an accommodation, or the user may not be aware the accommodation exists. Providing accommodations is an important part of our accessibility strategy. Technology is always changing and people's disabilities may present unforeseen barriers. Our goal is to make our technology as accessible as possible to minimize the amount of accommodations that need to be made. Next slide, please. Accessibility is a key component of our commitment to fostering diversity and inclusivity. But the benefits of accessibility extend beyond our moral imperative. Accessibility benefits everyone. When changes are made to a service to make it more accessible, it commonly improves the user experience for everyone, not just the intended audience. This is often called the curb cut effect. First mandated, excuse me, as a result of the Americans with Disabilities Act, sidewalks are now retrofitted to have ramps at crosswalks. The original intention was that they were added for people in wheelchairs. While curb cuts are successful in helping people in wheelchairs navigate crosswalks more safely, they also help some people pushing baby strollers or for people who are walking their bikes on the sidewalk, or makes distracted pedestrians crossing the street while looking at their phones slightly safer by making them less likely to trip on the curb. Changes made to help a specific disability frequently help everyone. Next slide, please. Accessibility is usability. Usability is the broad quality of how well the service meets the user's needs. People access resources for a reason, and if they are able to achieve their goals in a way that is intuitive and pleasant, they are more likely to return. If the resource is difficult, confusing, or frustrating, they may leave and never return. Next slide, please. Accessible services are more usable services. Consider this. Closed captions on videos help students understand complicated terminology, or speakers with accents, or if the viewers themselves speak English as a second language, or if the viewers are viewing materials in a crowded environment when they are unable to use the audio. A student is looking for a specific term in a long video. They can open up the transcript and do a text search for the relevant information versus skip around a video looking for the correct moment. Or third, you are browsing a website on your mobile device and you see two linked resources. One is to another website. One indicates that it is a 50 megabyte PDF. You choose to follow the website link, avoid unexpectedly downloading a large file, and quickly find the information you need. All of the above principles are accessibility requirements, and they certainly do help those specific populations, but they promote overall usability. Accessibility benefits everyone. Here at UMD, we currently have the Web Accessibility Policy, which I mentioned previously. This policy sets minimum standards for the accessibility of all university web-based information used to conduct university business and academic activities to ensure compliance with applicable state and federal regulations. But making things accessible is not just doing it because we have to or because it is the right thing to do. As a university that continues to promote an inclusive environment for everyone, we should also think about the guiding principles of the strategic plan, which include excellence, diversity, equity, and inclusion, impact, innovation, collaboration, and service to humanity. All of these principles support the idea that inclusion is the intersectionality of making sure that everything we do as an institution is inclusive of everyone and all diversity. Next slide, please. As the institution, part of the larger society, we oftentimes put up barriers for people with disabilities by the way that our society is organized. The social model looks at ways of removing barriers that restrict life choices for people with disabilities. When barriers are removed, people with disabilities can be independent and equal in society, with choice and control over their own lives. The medical model of disability says people are disabled by their impairments or differences. The video will help highlight the differences.
Imagine a town full of physically impaired people, all wheelchair users. They run everything. There aren't any able-bodied people, so naturally, when they built the town, the community decided it was pointless to have ceilings 10 foot high and doors 7 foot high. So the ceilings were built at 7 foot and the doors at 5 foot. In every way, they designed the place the way they wanted it. One day, a few able-bodied people come to stay. One of the first things they notice is the height of the doors. And the reason they notice is because they keep hitting their heads. they come to stand out by the bruises they carry on their foreheads. Soon doctors, psychiatrists and social workers all become involved. Committees are formed. Many people are worried about what becomes known as the problem of the able-bodied. Throughout the town there is a growth of real concern. Specially toughened helmets are handed out, free to the able-bodied, to be worn at all times. Braces are designed which give support and relief, while keeping the able-bodied wearer bent to normal height. Various groups of compassionate wheelchair users get together and form registered charities. Every quarter they have a collection day. Upturned helmets are left in pubs and shops for people to drop their small change into. There is talk of founding special homes. But then one day, it dawns on the able-bodied that there is nothing actually wrong with them, just that society excludes them.
So it is our goal to ensure that everyone, students, faculty, staff, and visitors, are all welcome to fully participate in all aspects of the university, and not just because it is the law, but because we want to continue to move this institution fearlessly forward in everything we do. And now with that, I would like to turn it over to Kosi to talk about the demonstration.
Hi, it's Kosi Asabere here. As you might have heard, I do stutter. Now I have stuttered since I could talk, so that is not new for me, but the blindness is pretty new. It isn't something that I've acquired over the last few years. People are often shocked to find that the hardest thing about my my blindness is not the blindness, but actually how society treats me as a blind person. It's the low it's the low expectations, it's the assumptions, it's the feeling of being left out of things, it's being reminded time after time that the world was not built for someone like me. So this leads me to the first topic I'm going to touch on. What is ableism? Well, it is discrimination against people with disabilities. It can be unintentional or intentional. It is based on the belief that there is a correct way for the mind and the body to function, and anything that falls outside of that norm is inferior. It centers around the notion that people with disabilities are less than. Disability is less than a problem to be fixed. I would say that disability is not a problem to be fixed, but a natural, inevitable part of life, part of the human it's part of what it means to be human. So we have a photo here. It's a man. It is a person who is standing, talking to a person in a wheelchair, and letting them know that wheelchairs are not allowed. So in accessibility is a byproduct of ableism. So in the work that Mita and I do, we often get a lot of pushback, and it sounds a little bit like this. I'm going to have Mita actually read off some of what we hear.
Sure. So some of what we hear is people with disabilities aren't our target customers. Our stats show that we don't have users with disabilities among our visitors. We don't receive complaints from users with disabilities. We had other priorities. We are planning to address accessibility in future versions. We didn't have the time nor the budget to make it accessible. We are sorry to hear that you had issues with our form. Could you get someone to help you fill it? What's the return on investment? What do we risk if we don't comply?
So what is the problem with these kind of statements? Well, they reveal a state of mind where disability is seen as an afterthought. It's seen as it's seen people are seen as second class second class users, being accessible is seen as in seen as an option. It is a choice that is sometimes consciously made purely on economic justifications. However, this line of thinking has implications. It passively excludes a large share of the population. It prohibits people from working with the product and also being part of being part of the choices. So how can we push back against ableism? One of the most important things we can do is make sure people with disabilities are at the table where the choices are choices are being made. Inaccessibility is rarely intentional. Thus, awareness about disability can greatly change the way accessibility is brought into the picture. Of course, to achieve this, it's vital to engage with people who actually have disabilities, to actively listen to us and infuse our feedback into to infuse our feedback. It's important to hire us, since we are the best source of knowledge regarding our life with a disability. It wouldn't be doing the right thing, but doing things right. Next slide, please. I'm going to have Mita describe this slide.
So for an IT product or service, so what is equitable access? For an IT product or service to be considered accessible with an assistive technology, also known as AT, users must be able to independently access all opportunities and benefits of the product or service, acquire the same information, successfully engage in the same interactions, and enjoy the same services with equivalent ease of use as compared to non-AT users. You should be able to produce the same quality of work accomplish tasks within an efficient time frame, and access key information and functionality. And it should be able to avoid difficult or time-consuming interactions.
So keep this definition in mind as you watch the demonstrations today. Next slide, please. So I will be showing two demonstrations. The first one is the basics of how someone might navigate with a screen reader. It's important to keep in mind, though, that the combination of tools and the way I use them is specific to me. So I will be using JAWS, which is a screen reader, with occasional magnification. So we're going to have Mita roll the first tape. It's Kosi Asabere here, Digital Accessibility Specialist. And today I'm here to basically go over the basics of a screen reader. So what is a screen reader? A screen reader is going to take the text on the screen and convert it to speech. This is a great tool for someone that might be blind or may not have a lot of sight. It's also helpful for those who have cognitive disabilities. So we're going to basically go over the basics. I'm going to start at the top, and I have a little disclaimer for you.
Home Office of the President. Visit same page links to visit link University of.
The speech is a little fast. It might be hard to hear, but that's because the rate at which someone speaks is often slower than the rate at which someone reads. So for someone who's using a screen reader, in order for them to keep up, be fast, and get their work done, or accomplish what they want to accomplish, they often will speed it up so they can get the job done.
Visit link, make a gift. Enable the search form button. Visit link Office of the President. Main navigation region. Visit link biography.
If that's too fast for you, let's slow it down.
Slower. List of items for slower. Link administration. Faster. List of items for
So
home.
how does a screen reader read? It starts at the top of a page and makes its way down.
Visited same page link. Skip navigation. Skip the content.
So I just heard a skip navigation, which is great because that means I can skip to the main content. We'll talk about skip links later, but for now we're at the top of the page, and it's going to start at the top and make its way down.
Visited link University of Maryland. Visited link make a gift.
It's going to identify the controls and links, list. So anything, it's going to read the text, but also what that text actually is.
Enable the search form button.
So we have a search form, and it's a button.
Visited link Office of the President. Main navigation region.
Now we're at navigation.
Visited link biography. List of items for biography button collapse.
So we're at the navigation.
Space. Home Office of the President. Header banner region.
I'm using the different keys. So the space bar, the tab key, up, down, left, right. Right now I activated the navigation with the space bar, and I'm going to use the arrow keys to go down this.
Link administration. List of items for administration but link communications. List of items for communications button collapse.
So
escape. List of items.
In the event that I already know the site really well and I don't want to go through the navigation, that's what that skip link is for. To go up and down to go from top to bottom can take a long time. I want to get to the meat of this page. So I'm going to navigate using the handy dandy H key. H is for headings.
Home Office of the President. Instruments of Hope heading level.
Heading level 1 is Instruments of Hope. That's fantastic. I'm going to create it helps me to create a mental map in my head of how this page is laid out. So heading level 1 is Instruments of Hope. What's heading level 2?
Office of the President, News in Maryland today, heading level 2.
Office of the President, News in Maryland.
Slower. Faster.
So that's where I want to be. Let's see what some of the news is.
Pines and Plank talk about entrepreneurship while seated on stage graphic.
So I heard some alt text, and that alt text was on the graphic. So it's describing to me what I should be seeing in the graphic. And since I can't see it, that's really helpful.
Blank. Link Kevin Blank. Be present and buy the lemonade. Blank. Alumni Under Armour founder shares wisdom at UMD Entrepreneurship Conference.
So it's also important to note that I can navigate line by line, word by word,
And Under Armour founder shares wisdom.
letter by letter,
ISDOM space.
paragraph by paragraph. Let's go over some of the other keystrokes. We can navigate in using the tab key and pull up a list of links. Let's pull up that list of links.
Links list dialog. Links list view.
So this is a handy dandy tool that we can use that's built into the screen reader. Also great if you want to test, because you can see the list of links on this page.
Selected University of Maryland, 2 of 30.
It tells me that there are 30 links on this page.
Selected make.
So if you ever hear someone tell you that the links should make sense out of context, the link should be meaningful and unique, it's because screen readers can pull up this list of links and decide where they want to go based on these links. But if the links say click here, click here, click here, they're not going to be able to know the purpose of the link, or the link
Selected
will
office of the
take us. So let's close that for now.
Escape.
There are plenty of other keystrokes and shortcuts that make life better for someone who needs to use a screen reader. Thank you. Now, this next clip we're going to show is a demonstration of me going through a live site on the web. This is a retail site, and we're going to see how that goes. We're going to take a little trip to
Why are you author? NASA Home Office of the NASA Google. Why are
Steve Madden.
Steve Madden
Here we are. I have been meaning to do some shopping. I'm in the mood for some sandals. Summertime. Let's have some fun with this.
Steve Madden registered official site, free shipping on orders $50 plus.
More. Okay, Steve Madden. Show me the sandals.
Blank. Order now to receive in time for blank minus 175 D13H23M26S.
Don't know what that is. Let's keep going.
Same page link, skip to header.
Skip to header. They do have some skip to content. Skip to links.
Same page link, skip to menu. Visited same page link, skip to content.
Skip to content.
Steve Madden registered official same page link, skip to footer. Visited same page link, skip to space.
Okay.
Main region page has 1 frame, 4 regions, 28 headings, and 101
Looks like we got 101
Main.
links. Let's see if we can get to the sandals. Okay.
Link banner desktop / mobile. Link banner desktop / mobile. Link banner desktop / mobile.
I keep hearing the same thing.
Link banner desktop
Let's see,
/
maybe
mobile.
arrowing won't help here. Let's tab.
Banner desktop / mobile link. Clothing.
Okay.
Banner desktop / mobile link. Handbags. Banner desktop / mobile link. Men. Banner desktop / mobile link. Rebooted.
Rebooted. I am a little lost here.
Blank. Heading level 2 bestsellers.
Let's just go with bestsellers and see what we got.
Space. Main region. Link banner desktop / mobile. Link banner desktop / mobile.
Same thing again,
Link banner
over
desktop.
and over.
Link banner visited. Link banner desktop / mobile. Link banner desktop / mobile.
Okay.
Link banner desktop / mobile.
Try one more time to get to the sandals.
Blank. Heading level 2 bestsellers. List of 4 women's button. Men's button. Women's
women,
space.
we're getting
Women's
closer
button.
here. Button.
Men's button. Space. Men's button.
Okay.
Space. Women's button.
I don't know what I selected here.
List of 4 women's button.
Women.
Space. Women's button.
Women's button. Don't know if I selected it or not. Let's keep going.
Men's button. Handbags button. Clothing button. List end. Link graphics stereo rhinestones.
Let's
Blank.
see.
4.4 star rating, 434 reviews.
Something with rhinestones.
Slinky 30 black, Slinky 30 black, $89.95. Link graphic.
Slinky black 30, Slinky black 30. Have no clue what that is.
4.4 star link 304 back in stock. Visited link graphic newbie rhinestones.
Newbie rhinestones. Still have no clue what that is. But let's just see if I click on it, it'll give me a little bit more.
Space. https://www.
So
Blank. Order now to receive in time for
I'm
the
hoping that
holidays.
there's a main navigation, a main content link, so I can go right to where I need to go.
Main region.
Does have a main region.
Back in stock.
Back in stock.
Link product / newbie rhinestones.
Rhinestone. I think that's what I selected.
Blank. Heading level 1 newbie rhinestones. 4.5 star rating.
4.5 star rating.
Newbie rhinestones sandals, women's rhinestones, designer sandals,
Oh, so
and Steve Madden.
These are sandals. Okay. Don't know what they look like, have no clue, but they are sandals.
Color rhinestone.
Color is rhinestone.
Blank. Heading level 3, $99.95.
That's a lot for some sandals. It looks like it's $99 for the sandals that I have no clue what they look like.
4 interest-free installments of $24.98 with link Afterpay information opens a dialog.
Looks like this is a dialog. Let's see what this Afterpay agreement would be.
Space. Afterpay information opens a dialog.
Pause the screen reader so it's not talking so much.
Or link graphic number graphic.
Link number graphic.
Link product / newbie P-bone. Link product / newbie rainbow multi. Visited link product / newbie rhinestones. Size 6.
I'm a little confused. Visually, I'm assuming that there's probably a dialogue up here because we did select a dialogue.
5.5.
But I'm hearing 5.5, 6.
6.5.
Sounds like these are shoe sizes. So how do I get to this dialogue?
7. 7.5. 8. 8.5.
Little stuck. Let's see.
11.
How do I get there?
10,
So it looks like the focus is not on the dialogue. It's in the background, which is definitely a problem for screen readers because now I'm just lost. So let me just try and get out of the dialogue.
Escape.
Looks like I'm trapped. I can't get out of the
link,
dialogue.
Same page, link size. Newbie Rhines, add the wish list button.
This is frustrating. So I'm stuck, cannot continue on. This is definitely a blocker here. I wanted to see if I could add the sandals to the cart, but I'm not entirely sure I even want those sandals because the alternative text is not clear. It looks like I'm trapped on the site. So the goal of getting these sandals, I don't believe I have been successful today. So that was my attempt to shop on a retail site. And I will say that for those who know me, when I shop, I really shop. So I had money to spend, but the reality is I had such a hard time trying to buy those sandals on that site. The odds are that I won't come back. And the odds are I'm going to tell others about this. I'm going to tell all my friends. I'm going to tell my family. So this is not necessarily a good look. And you know, I was not able to use my money there, and I'm going to use it somewhere else. So this is something to keep in mind when you don't think about these things. You drive buyers away. So now that we've seen some of these demos, now what? So I'm going to have Mita tell you about what's next. What can we do now that we've seen this?
So a lot of people think that accessibility doesn't apply to them, but it really applies to everyone, and you can implement it in your everyday tasks. So such as writing emails, updating websites, creating documents and materials, handbooks, guides, report, any information materials, newsletters, flyers, presentations and lectures, social media, any applications, e-tools, and software. So next slide. Where can we start? Take a look at the content you are currently producing. Think about the emails you send, the websites you have, and the lesson plans you create, and the social media content you post. Prioritize anything newer and public facing, and question everything. Ask the question, is this accessible? And then you can also apply the 6 essential do-it-yourself steps. And we also have a quote here where it says, a lot of people don't think accessibility applies to them. But if you're creating an event, sending an email, even sending a meme, writing a blog, creating a course, it all applies to you. So now let's talk a little bit about the 6 essential steps for accessibility. These steps were created by our colleagues from the Division of Information Technology, IT Accessibility team. We encourage you to register for the DIY 6 Essential Steps event taking place on Friday, June 24th, 2022, which is tomorrow, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for an in-depth look at how to create more inclusive and accessible content. So this infographic overview of the UMD IT Accessibility 6 Essential Steps for Accessibility includes headings, links, color and contrast, images, tables, and media. We will now dive a little bit into each step. Let's start with the first essential step, headings. We want to make sure to use properly formatted headings to structure a web page or document. Never skip heading levels. When you create subheadings, are they nested under one another? For example, if you have news articles as a heading level 2, are the articles a heading level 3, article titles a heading level 3? It is also important to use built-in styles within platforms such as Word, Google Documents, and content management systems. Using built-in styles is more optimal for assistive technologies in comparison to bolding and making the font larger to create a pseudo heading. There's a supplemental diagram we have. So think of heading level 1 as your book title. Heading 2s are your chapters, and heading 3s are any sections within your chapter, and so on. But it is also important to remember to not go beyond a heading level 6. Otherwise, too many nested headings can get a little bit messy. Now we will watch a brief demo on headings and screen readers. The demo site being used is a fictional site called Accessible University, which has both a before and after homepage.
So today we're going to check for the headings on this fictional web page. It is a university site. So I'm going to run the WAVE, which is a web accessibility evaluation tool.
Control-Shift-U.
Using the screen reader JAWS as well. And we're going to jump to the headings. Headings should be starting with H1, H2, H3, and they should outline, create an outline of what's on the page.
Summary heading level 2. Structural elements heading level 6 button December 1st heading level 6.
Sounds like we're starting with heading level 6, which is a problem.
Structural elements heading level 5 button contrast errors very low contrast button a great holiday event heading level 5.
Heading level 5, we're learning that the contrast is low, but we're also seeing that it goes from 6 to 5.
Structural elements heading level 6 button December 31st heading level 6.
Heading level 6.
Structural elements heading level 5 button contrast errors very low contrast button New Year's Eve party heading level 5.
Another heading level 5. This does not give me a good idea of the layout of the page, and I have no idea really what is covered on this page.
Now let's talk about links and link text. It is important to write meaningful link text. Links embedded in the text should describe the link's destinations. It is important to avoid using link text such as click here, read more, or this to describe the link destination. And keep in mind when you're pasting raw long URLs, it is better to have contextual link text. Otherwise, a screen reader ends up reading something like https:// and then just basically continues on. Basically the entire URL, which can be quite annoying. But if you're creating URLs, be sure to keep the structure simple and readable. Use hyphens instead of underscore. Using hyphens instead of underscores are highly recommended. And we have a supplemental image where we're comparing accessible versus non-accessible link text. So instead of using read more, it's using link text such as browse campsites. Instead of learn more, it's using link text such as read our full mission. So now let's take a brief look at our links demo.
We're going to check for links. I'm going to pull up the list of links using JAWS. Insert F7.
Links list dialog. Links list view. Selected before version with problems unavailable. 1 of 27.
So
To move to items.
it says we have 27 links. Let's see if we can find.
Selected app. Selected images. Selected about. Selected academic. Selected admissions. Selected visitors. Selected images. Selected fiction. Selected university. Selected problems. Selected click here. Selected click here.
Here, click here. A second click here.
Selected
And a
click
third
here.
click here. This is the problem because out of context, Screen Reader has no idea where those links take them, what is the contents of those links, and whether those are even the same links. We can run Wave to investigate further without a Screen Reader.
Escape.
So now let's talk about color and contrast. So it is important to use sufficient color and contrast. Add labels to your charts and graphs to bring more meaning to them, and avoid using color alone to convey meaning. A popular example would be using green to convey something positive and red to convey warnings. Without any kind of context, this information can be meaningless to somebody who is colorblind. So we have an example of what is bad contrast. It's like a light orange text against an orange background. And an example of good contrast is white text against a dark blue background. And our second image is a depiction of points scored by via a pie chart. So it looks like team 1 takes up 21.8% of the pie chart in blue. Team 2 takes up 32.7% of the pie chart in red. And team 3 takes up 10.9% of the pie chart in yellow. And team 4 takes up 34.5% of the pie chart in green. So this gives me a lot more context than just using color alone. We will now go into some brief demos for color and contrast.
Color and contrast. It's important that color is not the sole means of conveying important information. So an example of that would be on this form right here. We have
required fields are in blue.
Required fields are in blue. This is a problem because if I'm using a screen reader or I am colorblind, I will not know what fields are required. If we go to the after page,
after accessible universe,
we see that
blank, name, star, blank, fields with a star are required.
They have fields with a star are required. This is much better because now
blank, name, star.
I hear the name, I hear the star, and I know that I am required to put in my name. Color and contrast.
Okay, so now I'm going to play the contrast demo.
Contrast is important for many types of users. This includes people who are colorblind and those who have low vision. So we will use the Wave tool to assess the contrast. I have the Wave tool up right now, and it shows that there are several contrast issues, many of which are related to the links. So the ratios we will look at are 3-to-1 for text that is larger than 18 font or 18 points. And then for text that is smaller, 4.5-to-1. For those who may not be able to see the screen, we have gray or some green on black, and it is very hard to see.
So now let's talk about a little bit about images. So alternative text, also known as alt text, is descriptive text that conveys the meaning and context of a visual item in a digital setting. It can be on a document, web page, an application, or social media. Alt text is used for low bandwidth as well. Have you ever noticed a page loading a little slow so the images don't come up yet? This is where you can potentially see the alt text if it's coded in. Another bonus to alternative text is that it increases searchability of the content that is published on the web. So now let's talk about some do's and don'ts for writing alt text. We're going to be writing alt text for one of the most iconic moments in popular culture, specifically for individuals growing up in the early 2000s, SpongeBob and Squidward selling Krusty Krab pizza for the first time. So what are some do's for creating alt text? For starters, be succinct. Think 140 characters or less, like a tweet. This, of course, applies to images. Graphics, charts, and infographics will need a little bit more detailed descriptions. It is important to describe the image's purpose rather than the unnecessary details of the image. So in our do example, we have Squidward is annoyed with SpongeBob's antics on their way to deliver pizza. So now for what you should not do. Don't use graphic of or image of in front of the alt text. This is redundant for a screen reader user. Most of the time, screen readers are aware of all the graphics on the page. Therefore, using words like graphic of or image of before your alternative text is not necessary. Don't worry about adding too many details. It is often unnecessary. Think about describing the image to somebody on the phone. What do you think they would care about? Let's look at our don't example. So we have an image of Squidward and SpongeBob under the sea. SpongeBob is holding a pizza and wearing a hat and a square suit, and Squidward is wearing a t-shirt. These are a lot of details, and they don't really mean much to me. Almost seems decorative. So, and now let's talk about tables. So it is important to create tables with columns and row headers. Do not merge or split cells. Avoid unnecessary blank spaces, and do not use tables for any sort of formatting. All of these things will create issues for people using screen readers. And lastly, be sure to provide a table summary. Overall, we recommend keeping tables as simple as possible. And our image description is an example of a table on a syllabus where it discusses reading assignments and topics of each week. We'll now go into the tables demo.
Tables. So we're going to look at two versions of tables. One's going to be a good table, one's going to be a bad table. So I'm going to be using JAWS, and we're going to start to navigate using the keystrokes and shortcuts.
Table with 11 columns and 5 rows. Column 1, row 1, blank.
So I'm just giving you an idea of how the screen reader sounds.
Last year. This year. CS. N. Eco. Phi. Psi. 112, row 32, column 5. 43, 120, 84.
So it is hard to understand what we are hearing based on the context.
89, 84, 73.
The rows are not associated with the columns, and it's unclear what content is being displayed here. So now let's go to the accessible table.
Back in chat. Before, after accessible
So gonna hit the T key.
table with 6 columns and 4 rows. This table shows enrollment over a 1-year period by subject and gender.
It has a summary here.
Computer science,
Computer science, so it's clear what we are referring to.
English, economics, physics, total 32, row 2.
32.
Economics 43,
For
column 4.
economics, it's 43.
Percent male 73%.
Percent male
row 3.
is 70% or 73%.
Percent
So we know now that there is an association between the cells, the rows, and the columns, and it all makes sense within the context of the header. Also, table is broken up into 2, which is easier for both people who don't have sight and those that do have sight. It's clearer to understand.
And our last and final essential step is media. So it's important to add captions to your videos. Most of the videos we have provided as examples use closed captioning. Be sure to edit all machine or automated captions through whichever platform you use, such as Zoom, Panopto, YouTube. A lot of automated captioning can be inaccurate, so it is always good to go back and edit all captions or go through a professional captioner. It is also important to provide a transcript for audio files, and it is important to provide audio descriptions for visually relevant content. So that concludes the 6 essential steps. And now we are going to talk about some small ways where you can evaluate for accessibility for all of the digital experiences surrounding you. We will talk about things like responsiveness, keyboard navigation, HTML, and using free accessibility tools like Wave. So let's start with responsiveness. Web content must be capable of resizing. We should be able to seamlessly consume the content on different size screens, whether it's a desktop, iPad, or mobile phone. One way you can simply test is to see how your screen looks when you resize it from 200 to 400% on a laptop or desktop. If you're using a Mac, the commands are Command++ to zoom in on your screen and Command - to zoom out of it. And on a PC, it is Control++ and Control -. By doing this simple test, you can gauge how content will look on a mobile phone. Now that we've talked about screen compatibility, let's talk about keyboard compatibility. As we have now learned, there are multiple types of users of the web. A significant chunk can only operate the web with a keyboard. This includes screen reader users, as well as users who cannot hold a mouse. The web should be equally functional with a mouse as it is with a keyboard. So, to introduce you to keyboard navigation, we have come up with a fun little acronym called teasers. Think of this as a teaser into keyboard navigation. We want you to look at your keyboard and familiarize yourself with 6 different types of keys: the tab key, the escape key, the arrow keys, the space bar, the enter or return key for Mac, and the shift key. Now, using the tab key, try to tab to all the interactive elements on the websites. This includes links, buttons, dropdowns, form elements. And check for focus indicators. These are outlines that can help you track the movement of your keyboard. Check for skip to main content and skip navigation links at the top. Using the escape key, open a drop-down menu and see if you can escape out of it using only the escape key. Using the arrow keys, try navigating through a drop-down's contents using the up and down arrow keys. And using the spacebar, try to check a checkbox on a form. Using the enter or return keys, try to submit a form. Using the shift key, try to tab to a previous interactive element. So you would do tab plus shift to go back. And being able to navigate with a keyboard is also dependent on the semantics of the way that the website is coded. which leads us to tell you to use semantic markup when you deal with HTML. A semantic element clearly describes its meaning to both the browser and the developer. It is important to ensure that HTML is semantically structured. Think of these elements as building blocks for a web page. We have a diagram of ambiguously marked up sections using div tags versus more clearer sections using semantically marked up HTML elements such as the header, the nav, section, article, aside, and footer. Using semantically marked up HTML benefits screen reader users who rely on speech-to-text technologies, and also it increases searchability on Google. So think about these questions. Are proper tags being used? For headings, are you using H1 to H6? For form fields, are there input types? Because not every field should be a text field. Can something within a div be replaced with a more appropriate element? So instead of, let's say, play video settled within 2 divs, use the button tags to create a button that says play video, and are the correct input types being used? So for like buttons, is the submit type being used for submit buttons? And do all pages have a title? And if they do they use the title tag? The tools are all there. In fact, I heard this from an accessibility advocate named Rachel DiTullio, that the web is inherently accessible. So if you use the tools it provides you, you will not have to do much work to make things accessible. Which takes me to the next point about ARIA. So accessible rich internet applications, are also known as ARIA, is a set of attributes you can add to HTML elements that define ways to make web content and applications accessible to those who use assistive technologies, also known as AT. It's beneficial for dynamic screen reader notifications, such as displaying search results, notification of form field errors, announcing alert, page loading notifications. But we also recommend you see the World Wide Web Consortium's recommendations on when it is appropriate to use. Because the first rule of ARIA is to not use it. It's not a substitute for non-semantic HTML. We highly encourage everyone to use proper HTML elements such as labels, buttons, headings, form elements. And some meme credit goes to the WebAIM organization. It's a meme displaying a play on words of Homer Simpson's toast, which says, "To ARIA, the cause of and solution to all our accessibility problems." So let's talk about one of my favorite tools, Wave. You probably got a little bit of an idea of how the tool works through some of Kosi's demos. Wave is a web accessibility evaluation tool that is free and available to add as a browser extension. It can automatically identify common barriers to accessibility. There is also a built-in contrast checker. So I have an example of the summary of Wave results, which includes errors, contrast errors, alerts, features, structural elements, and ARIA. But one thing to keep in mind, we should never solely rely on automated tools. These help us draw a foundation, but we do have to manually evaluate our content continuously and iteratively because technology is changing, laws are changing, and guidelines are changing. Now that you have some tools under your belt, let's do a scavenger hunt. Accessibility is everyone's responsibility. It takes a village to foster the practice of accessibility. This is your own personal scavenger hunt. We are providing some foundational tools, such as a handout full of ideas and resources to investigate. Look at all the digital content surrounding you. Look at your own content. Advocate for accessibility. An example would be to ask your favorite podcast host to provide transcripts if they don't do so already. Another example would be to run the Wave extension on various websites and see what you find. Navigate a website using only a keyboard. These are just some of the things that you can do. Don't feel limited to what you see on the handout. There are plenty of things you can do. And we encourage you to share with us what you are doing and what you're finding and realizing through our scavenger hunt form. Take this as an opportunity for progress. Accessibility benefits every single person, and it creates independence and empowerment for people with disabilities. While it is a legal requirement to be accessible, don't think of this as something that you have to do, but think of this as something you get to do. You have some tools now, and you get to make things accessible. So happy hunting, and we will now move into our question and answer segment.
That's my cue. Y'all, I've been getting so many questions. So audience, thank you so much for putting such thoughtful questions into the Q&A, and we're going to try to get to a few of these. First, I want to share just a huge thanks for all of you. Kosi got some big shout outs for the screen reader demo. People were really loving it. Big shame on Steve Madden. That's on people's minds right now. Mita, I want to start with a couple like specific questions for you about tables that I'm getting in here. The first one is if you can explain what you mean by don't use tables for formatting.
Yes, so it's important to make sure that tables are more for data. It's not like you're not creating something for formatting or any kind of like information that doesn't involve data. So that's mostly what I meant.
Yeah, like don't sort of try to do a table hack for something that shouldn't really be a table.
Exactly.
Okay. How I thought of it in my head is like if you wouldn't maybe share it on Google Sheets or in Excel, like maybe it's not really meant to be a table. Is that sort of a good rule maybe?
Yes. So it's like a lot of copy and pasting goes on. So it's like if you're creating a table, we wouldn't want to copy from like Google Sheet into like Word. Word has functionality to create tables, so we would want to do that instead of copy pasting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Use the tools available to you in the platform that you're in. Okay, also for tables, do you need to specify for each cell, like under what row and column it is? Do you have to repeat the header row and the column titles when you're doing your text for tables?
So we just have to specify row headers. Most of the time the screen reader will announce which cell it is.
Cool. And that demo was, I thought, very helpful. So as a reminder to folks, we will have the recording to share out so you can go revisit all of those. I definitely want to go on Kosi's sandals buying adventure again, as frustrating as it was. And also I'm thinking we will provide the videos individually so you can get to them a little quicker. Mita, let's talk about PDFs. Are PDFs accessible?
So similar to ARIA, one of the first rules of PDFs is to avoid as much as possible. Most of the time, PDFs are not created to be accessible. One of the things, and to make it accessible, it can be a cumbersome process. So always have alternative formats. If you're posting a PDF to a website, consider using HTML instead. Have text versions of PDFs, especially for graphic heavy PDFs. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would like to add on.
Yeah, go ahead, Kosi.
So in our scavenger hunt, we do have a list of sources, which we will add on. So we should have something in there related to PDFs. If we don't, we will add that as soon as we can. And tables, I believe, are on there as well. So tables can be a little complex, so it's good to go through those links and really read through, and that should guide you.
Thank you. Yeah, so many good resources that my friends here have gathered together. So go through those, nerd out hard on them. I love them. So there's a lot to learn. Let's see. Well, here's maybe an easy one that came early on. Do we have like a definite pronunciation of WCAG? Is it WCAG versus WCAG? Is there really is it a GIF situation where we're not necessarily 100% decided?
I've always heard it as WCAG.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I've heard too, but as long as we're talking about it, I feel like we're on a good path.
Somebody had their hand raised.
Oh, we got a hand raised.
I think it was Alia. I don't know.
I see it. Okay. Ali, I am going to allow you to talk. Let's see if that works. You can feel free and turn your mic on and ask us a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the awesome presentation. My name is Ali Abdurrahmani. I'm myself legally blind, a screen reader user. That was the most comprehensive presentation of the usage of screen readers. Thank you very much. That was awesome. Just I wanted to add a little bit of information about those 3 questions that were asked regarding the tables. If you don't mind, I want to add some more points to that.
Please do.
Yeah. So by formatting, especially it means visual formatting. For example, I have seen a lot of resumes that, for example, they use tabular tools for visual presentation of information. For example, making columns or whatever. But for example, Microsoft Word has multiple column sections that we can use as a tool instead of using a table to visually format the content. This is also held true when we are providing digital content on the web. So when it says, even it's on the WCAG or WCAG guidelines that don't use tables for visual formatting, this actually means that, because it would be a little bit confusing when you are traversing with a screen reader, if that clears a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
You so much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we do have an example that we can put up at some point, but it shows just that if you can avoid using just laying things out in a table because they look nice is often going to harm others who are using a screen reader. So you had a lot of great points there.
Yeah, that's awesome too. I'm so grateful that you have already mentioned those, because this is a very typical thing that for visual layouts, tables are used instead of like column tools or whatever editor that we are using. For example, Microsoft Word column features are really good and accessible to be used. So that's a really important thing. And regarding the PDF, I just wanted to add something. As very beautifully indicated in the presentation, that when we want to think about accessibility, we should just think about it from the scratch in the beginning, that we are doing things instead of delaying it for a later time. If we use appropriate tools when we are generating PDFs, then we can make them very easily accessible and much more usable. For example, as mentioned in the presentation, instead of using bold formatting or font size to just make a title in Microsoft Word, it's better that we use styles, right? Heading styles. And worth mentioning is that if every accessibility feature in Microsoft Word, for example, is used to make a document, and you use the save as PDF capability of Microsoft Word, it results in the most in the most accessible PDFs I have ever made, because as a PhD student over the past 8 years, I have published a lot of papers that I had to make accessible because I am an assistive technology and accessibility researcher. So contributing to assets community, whatever paper I have ever written with Microsoft Word and use that save as PDF feature, because I have already made all the styles and headings built into my document, the PDF was 100% accessible. So this is really important, how we use the tools that we have at hand. Just another example that mentioned by the presenters, that we have the tools ready, and the web is inherently accessible if we use the correct tools. I want to say PDFs could also be accessible if we use the correct tools. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Those are really, really great. As you know, we could talk about PDFs for a whole day and still not be done, but you have a lot of really great points there. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. My pleasure.
Okay, can I ask a few screen reader questions here? People are loving the screen reader demo. Again, you can go back and review those, and great points. Folks are wondering how we can test things on our own with a screen reader. Is that a thing we can do? Should we hire people to do it for us? Do you have recommendations on that front? If I want to make sure that my content is accessible, what's the best way?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So there are a couple of things here. It is good to test with the screen reader. It is, I just want you guys to be aware that there is a learning curve though. So while you can test it, it actually might be worthwhile to hire people to test, because it can be somewhat of a challenge. But WebAIM has a lot of really great tools. I mean, they have some cheat sheets where you can learn some of those JAWS keystrokes. But like I said, two things. Testing will take some time, and you also want to actually see if you can find people that will test that use a native screen reader. I know a couple of organizations now, Ability, NFB. I'll put some of those links in our list once we get off of this a meeting. But really, that's a really, I mean, I get asked that a lot, so thanks for that. And if anybody else wants to add on to that, feel free.
Anybody? Okay. How about bar charts, pie charts? I know you showed for color contrast, Mita, a pie chart with the colors, but are those going to be recognizable by screen readers, or do we have to put in alt text for those?
So yes, you will have to put in alt text for those, and you will have to describe it a little bit beyond like how you describe an image. You have to kind of describe the purpose of the bar chart. And it's also important to ensure that the bar chart is not just represented with colors, but like with some texture as well. So yes, you will have to put alt text.
It might even be more than alt text. Sometimes you might need script help me out here. A longer description. So sometimes you can have the alt text write in that chart, but you can also have a summary right below that chart, or a link to the long text. So those are some ways that you can describe that chart, but a screen reader will not know right off the bat what is going on in that chart. So you have to do a little bit of work there.
Thanks, Kosi. All right, forms, accessible forms. Do these rules apply that we talked about when you're creating forms in Google Forms or other? Actually, there was an example of like an interactive game, like an escape room. Should we be thinking about these rules outside of just one space and into other spaces?
Absolutely. So forms are, we did not cover forms because that would also be, take a lot of the presentation. We do have some links that we will add to our list, but you are right there. These, you do have to think about these things when you're creating forms, but there's a lot more there that you will also have to think about. For example, do you have instructions? If you look at like we have to make sure the labels are associated with each form field. So there's a lot that goes on there. If the form is if someone puts in something into the form and it's a mistake, a user has to be able to know that that is a mistake. So there's a lot to think about there, but we will provide that in our list of links for you.
Yeah, there's really great resources coming your way, so keep an eye out for those. I think we have time for one last question. Try to sneak it in here. Evan asked, sort of noticed, right, that usability in general, as we were talking about usability, is often seen as an afterthought. So, like curb cuts, would you say that building a culture of integrating usability into the design process is something that would make things better for everyone?
100%. Thank you for bringing this up. This is so important to think about usability and inclusive design from the start. That's the best way to make sure we all can use these tools and these products, these apps. Anything you make, it's better to like incorporate it from the start. I don't know if anybody else would like to add on, but that's such a great point.
Yeah, Kosi, thank you so much for saying that. And thank you very much for the question. That is a fabulous question. And absolutely, it is 10 times better to design it right from the start as opposed to retrofitting it later. It's like if you build a building, you build it right from the start as opposed to finding a way to retrofit it later with an accessible bathroom or an accessible entrance. And, it costs more money to do that. So it's actually more cost effective to build it right from the start. And it's really fits into what I said earlier in terms of, the strategic plan and wanting to ensure that everything we do is inclusive in our design process. So 100% support, designing things right from the first time. So thank you very much for the question.
I thought you all might like that question because I liked it too. It was a nice setup. So thank you. I know we have tons of other questions we didn't get to. I do think you will find some answers in the resources that we're going to send out. And this is a process. I'm still learning myself. And so we'll never get all of our questions answered. But I really want to honor the time of our amazing presenters today. And Mita, are you wrapping us up here?
Yeah, I just assumed because we're closing out. So I just put this.
Yeah. So we are ending with a big thank you to everybody for attending, for listening, for coming with really intelligent questions. We feel really passionate about this, and we're really happy that other people are interested and engaged in it as well. And we will close out with a quote from Niall DeMarco, who is a deaf activist and also a really beautiful model. There are more than 1.1 billion people in the world with some form of disability. Human diversity is what colors the world. So with that gem of wisdom from Niall DeMarco, we're going to let you all head on with your day, but stay engaged. Take a look at that scavenger hunt, and thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.